Okay, let's jump into this. Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
We've got this, well, stack of sources in front of us. We're looking at online bios, database entries, IMDb, the movie database, that sort of thing, even a Q&A site.
Right. And they're all focused on one person, Ebony Ayes. She's described, generally as an American model and actress across these different materials.
Yeah, and our job today really is to dive into this collection you brought together. We want to pull out the key details about her life, her career,
And just see what kind of picture emerges, when you look at all these different accounts side by side.
because like we always find when you're pulling from multiple online spots, the info doesn't always line up perfectly.
Exactly. And figuring out those variations, the discrepancies, that's really part of the discovery, isn't it?
Absolutely. So where should we start? The basics.
Yeah, let's do that. So, biographical details. The birth date seems pretty consistent, actually. January 28, 1962.
Okay, 1962. So that makes her 63 now, as of May 2025.
That's right, yeah. That date pops up in a few different places.
Yeah.
There's a Celebricate bio, a Spanish Wikipedia entry. They seem to agree on that.
But, straight away, a little wrinkle. Her birthplace.
Right, so that's Celebricate bio and a French Wikipedia page lists Savannah, Georgia.
Savannah, okay.
But then you look at the Spanish Wikipedia and a Frisian Wikipedia entry,
Yeah.
and they say Atlanta, Georgia.
Huh. Both Georgia, obviously, but two pretty different cities. That's interesting.
It is. Shows how quickly even basic facts can diverge online.
Mm-hmm.
Her nationality, though, that's consistently American.
And ethnicity generally listed as Black or African American.
That seems standard across the board. Physical details are mentioned, too. Height seems stable, around 5'6".
So what's that, about 1.67, 1.68 meters?
Yeah, roughly. And weight also pretty consistent, 130 pounds or 59 kilos.
Okay. Eye color brown, hair color black. Standard enough.
Seems like it. Until you get to her figure size. This is where it gets noticeable.
How so?
Well, one source, that's Celebrity one again, lists her measurements as 36E 2638.
3060. Okay, got that.
But then the English translation on the movie database, TMDB, and also the Spanish Wikipedia entry, they both say 36JJ 2638.
Whoa, hold on, JJ. That's a massive difference from an E-cup.
It really is. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Different standards, different times, maybe just a typo somewhere along the line.
Or different industries measuring differently. It's a
Yes.
huge variation to find in basic data points.
It is striking. We're just reporting what the sources say, but yeah, E versus JJ. It's a big gap when you're trying to build a clear picture.
Absolutely. Okay, so moving on to her career. The general description is model and actress.
Right. In one bio, Celebrity, mentioned she graduated in 85 and has been active since, getting acclaim in movies, publications, ads.
But then several sources get much more specific, right? They focus on the adult film industry.
Exactly. The Spanish Wikipedia, the English TMDB profile, the Frisian Wikipedia, they all explicitly call her a pornographic actress or model.
And the timelines for when she was active, well, they seem to be all over the place.
Yeah, talk about variation. Celebrity gives a vague 1985 present.
Present. Okay.
But then the Spanish Wikipedia and the English TMDB say active, like filming between 85 and 94.
Okay, 85 to 94.
A Spanish one adds she continued work until 96 and fully retired maybe early 2000s. But the English TMDB is much tighter, 85 to 90 active, and says she is retired.
Just 85 to 90. That's a much shorter window.
And then the Frisian Wikipedia just lists 1985-1997 as her active years.
Wow. So pinning down a definitive retirement date from these sources is basically impossible.
Pretty much. Each one tells a slightly different story on the timing. But what several do agree on is her work in magazines.
Right. They list specific titles like D-Cup, Score, Jugs.
Players, Blacktail,
Yeah.
those come up repeatedly.
And here's a really specific detail from the Spanish Wikipedia and mentions she had a sex column.
Yeah, in Blacktail apparently, in the mid-90s. A sex column.
That's definitely not your standard IMDb entry. It shows a different side of her work.
Absolutely. And there's another career turn mentioned, post-film work. Both the Spanish Wikipedia and the Italian TMDB translation mention her working as a dominatrix.
A dominatrix where?
In Atlanta, Georgia, after leaving film around 94.
Atlanta again. That connects back to one of the possible birthplaces. Interesting.
It does add a little geographic thread there, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, another thing is the names. She used quite a few, apparently.
Aliases.
Yeah, or alternative names. The sources list Coco, Ebony, Ebony Ayes, Ebony Ayes,
With an E. Okay.
Phyllis Roberts, Priscilla Roberts, Taffy, Abundance Jones, and Ebony Ayes.
That's a lot of names. And didn't one source claim to know her real name?
Yes, the Frisian Wikipedia. It lists Phyllis Roberts, spelled Phyllis, as her echternam.
Which means real name.
Exactly. And variations of that name, Phyllis or Phyllis Roberts, do appear as aliases elsewhere.
So one source claims it's the real name, others just list it as another alias. How do you verify something like that from just these online bits and pieces?
It's really difficult. You can't definitively confirm it just from this stack. It raises questions about how these sites source or verify that kind of information.
Right. And speaking of official-looking databases, IMDb, it lists one specific role for her, doesn't it?
It does, Wanda, in a film called The Godmother II from 1988.
Okay, so one credit. But you'd think IMDb would have more if she was active for years.
Well, here's the thing. If you actually go to her other works page on IMDb,
Yeah.
it literally says, it looks like we don't have any other works for this person yet.
Wow. So one specific credit slips through, maybe from a specific data feed, but the rest of her potential filmography isn't captured there.
Seems like it. It's a perfect example of how information can be fragmented, even on a major platform, especially when someone's career might span industries that are, let's say, documented differently.
That makes sense. Now, several sources do mention her significance, like her place in history within the adult film world.
Yes, quite a few note that she was considered one of the first prominent African-American women in mainstream pornographic films.
Often mentioned alongside names like Jeannie Pepper or Heather Hunter.
Mm-hmm. Both the Spanish and Italian Wikipedia entries highlight that pioneering aspect.
And there was something about an award or recognition.
Yes, the Spanish Wikipedia specifically states she's scheduled for induction into the AVN Hall of Fame in 2025.
AVN, Adult Video News.
That's the one, their Hall of Fame. So a major industry recognition apparently happening this year, according to that source.
Okay. Now, we also looked at that Q&A site, answers.com. That had a different kind of information entirely.
Completely different. Yeah, someone asked, how does Ebony Ayes look today? And there's an answer, quite old but updated, saying something like,
I heard she stripped for a while in Georgia.
Huh.
And has really blown up weight-wise and is retired. Something like that.
Exactly. I heard, it's pure anecdote, hearsay.
Right. It's not presented as facts, just as something someone heard. It really highlights the spectrum of information you find online, from structured data to, well, gossip.
It's a totally different category of source.
Hmm.
And it reminds you to be critical about where the information comes from.
For sure. And even within the same site, like the movie database, we saw differences, right, between the English and Italian profiles.
Big differences, yeah. The English summary is quite brief.
Hmm.
Mentions retirement, the Atlanta origin maybe, those 1985, 1990 active years, and that 36JJ measurement.
Pretty bare bones.
But the Italian translation on the same site is much more detailed. It talks about her rise in the late 80s, early 90s.
Activity until 96. Participation in over 110 films between 87 and 89.
Specifics about genres she worked in, like interracial, breast fetish. It mentions the magazine work, the sex column.
And the dominatrix career in Atlanta, retiring fully in the early 2000s.
Right, it's like a mini biography compared to the English snapshot on the very same platform.
It's fascinating how different summaries of the same person can exist side by side like that.
It really is. And I think this whole deep dive just underscores how piecing together someone's story from these kinds of online sources is. Well, it's like assembling a puzzle.
Yeah, a puzzle where the pieces don't always fit or they show slightly different images.
Exactly. Her reported life model, adult film star, columnist, dominatrix, it's captured in these fragments. Sometimes they conflict, sometimes they add layers.
It really makes you think about how many different versions of a person's biography can exist online, especially if their career touched different industries or areas that get documented in very different ways.
You definitely have to put on your detective hat, cross-reference things, notice those discrepancies we found.
Like the birthplace Savannah or Atlanta, the bus size E or JJ, the active years, when did she actually work, the names.
The aliases versus the potential real name. And then throwing in unverified anecdotes from Q&A sites.
It shows that getting a full picture means looking beyond just one source, or even one type of source. You have to acknowledge where the record feels incomplete or contradicts itself.
Absolutely. Information gets siloed online or just isn't documented evenly across someone's entire life or career.
So for you listening, you can see the challenge, right? Trying to construct a clear narrative from this kind of scattered, sometimes conflicting online data.
Yeah, you have to constantly ask, where did this info come from? How reliable might it be? How consistent is it with other sources?
It leads to a bigger question, perhaps. When the digital footprint of someone's life looks like this fragmented, contradictory at times, how do we decide what's true or most reliable?
And what does it even mean to know someone through these kinds of disparate digital breadcrumbs? It's something to think about. What part of this whole picture stands out most to you?